A New York City college professor who allegedly cursed out anti-abortion students is under investigation for holding a machete to the neck of a New York Post reporter, the Post writes. Shalene Rodriguez made headlines for her comments to students at Hunter College over a pro-life display back on May 2nd. The students set up an information table with pamphlets and cards opposing abortion, and Rodriguez said they were triggering her students by tabling there. She continued, "You're not education, SHIT, this is effing propaganda." She also claimed that their presentation was violent. After the boy behind the table apologized for triggering students, she yelled and said he wasn't sorry, quote, "because you can't even have an effing baby." Rodriguez then pushed the materials off the table and continued cursing, the New York Post reports. Excuse me. The interaction was caught on video and posted on social media. A spokesperson for Hunter College, Vince DiMichele, told the New York Post that Rodriguez was fired following her confrontation with the students. This week, when New York Post reporter Reuven Fenton showed up at her door to ask her about the incident, she then reportedly threatened to chop him up. She then held a machete to his neck.
Away from my door. Get the away from my door.
Let's get out of here.
Rodriguez allegedly continued to yell profanities, told him to get the F away from her door. When the reporter and photographer left, she continued to chase them down the street and kicked the reporter as he tried to get in his car. The Post reports, DiMichele said Hunter College strongly condemns the unacceptable actions of Shalene Rodriguez and has taken immediate action. Rodriguez has been relieved of her duties at Hunter College effective immediately and will not be returning to teach at the school. Now, Rodriguez is under investigation by the NYPD following her interaction with the Post reporter, according to the police and law enforcement sources. Now, the former Hunter College professor could possibly face assault and other charges. Do you keep a machete right next to the door just in case you get an unwelcome visitor?
I don't. Many people do keep weapons and guns and things to defend their homes, and it's interesting that in other contexts that's perceived to be a very good thing. She might have been better off, frankly, having a gun and wielding it from her door, claiming some kind of castle doctrine, than I think really making the poor judgment to follow the reporter down the street, threatening him with a knife and then kicking him when he gets into the car. You know, she was swiftly fired. There was no foot dragging on holding her accountable the way there is in so many other instances. We just covered a story a couple of weeks ago. I don't think we covered it here, but it was covered broadly, of a man who's been standing with an automatic weapon at his child's school drop-off, saying that he was there to protect her in a way that was menacing to other parents, or other parents perceived to be menacing. And of course, that is his right to do so as well. But this was one where there's very little to say. You threaten people, you get arrested, you go to jail.
Right. It's about, I mean, she put the machete to his neck. I mean, if she had a gun and she pointed at his head, I would say it would be the same thing. I mean, I'm not saying she should suffer any charges.
I think the law is a little bit different. It's the actual assault aspect of it, which is more ambiguous when you're standing somewhere else with a weapon, not physically attacking a certain person, and also doing it from your home versus what she chose to do, which is to follow him, to chase him, as opposed to having a duty to retreat. She followed
him outside her apartment and kicked him. I mean, that's going to be, if they really want to bring charges, they probably can.
Yeah, it sounds like they are. It sounds like she's under investigation.
I mean, you don't have to answer your door if you don't want to talk to a reporter, which I frankly can totally understand.
Yeah.
Just say no thank you and don't answer your door.
That's true.
And if they don't go away, you can call the police.
Yeah.
You don't have to take matters into your own hands. Don't have to machete them.
This one seems like a straightforward case of someone breaking the law and the law acting appropriately, and importantly, her institution acting very quickly to censor her profession, to sanction her professionally. I obviously think she's allowed to have her beliefs and say anything that she wants to, but I don't think it's especially controversial to say a professor who is acting out, unable to kind of articulate her beliefs in a way that is persuasive and meaningful, but it instead is wiping papers off of a table and acting towards students in that way. You have an obligation as an educator
to act
to
with
be
a
more
certain kind of decorum. And
exactly, and that's just a part of the job.
Yeah.
And she failed to live up to those kind of expectations for a profession.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. And what else is there to say about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really seen anybody talk too much about this or be especially interested in defending her.
I mean, it was all over. It was on Fox. It was kind of right-wing because it had an abortion hook and that kind of thing.
Look, the reality is that sometimes people who share your beliefs do things that you don't have to support. And I would say that there's no need to throw your lot in with people. Like, abortion rights are important, and I understand her frustration for sure. Most Americans agree with that perspective, but I think most Americans don't agree with holding a machete to the neck of someone who comes and knocks at your door. Similarly, I think that if someone listens to your podcast and then turns out to be a Nazi who shoots people, you don't have to defend them just because they listen to your podcast. This is a real lesson in, not feeling the need to defend bad behavior just because someone ostensibly broadly agrees with your politics. And I haven't seen very many people, if any people really, I'm sure there are some, but I haven't seen much in the way of people coming to this woman's defense. I think her behavior is pretty indefensible. And,
Well, it's also funny to have an ideology that, she accused the pro-life students, the ones doing the display, of engaging in violence against her for having that perspective, and then she chases a reporter out of her house, kicking them, wielding a machete.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a very funny idea of what
words is violence.
Words is violence,
that
but not literal
thing,
violence.
All the black body stuff that was really big in the early aughts. I've never been a big fan of that stuff.
Yeah.
I also think that most people do believe in violence, and it's not a fun thing to say. No one wants to admit to it. People's feelings about when violence is appropriate has to do with what the underlying issue is. Most people would believe in violence for self-defense. A lot of people defended the violent act of choking Jordan Neely to death because there was a perception that he was threatening despite having not touched anybody on that train car before he was killed by Daniel Penny. People feel like bombing abortion centers is justified and killing adult people is justified in order to stop abortions from happening. Left terrorists have also obviously done bombings, et cetera, as well. In the name. So, I mean, I do think that it's all rhetorical, shit.
I'm also not seeing a lot of, with the attacks on journalism kind of framing that the media has, how this is such an unsafe time to be a journalist. This is a mainstream media perspective that journalists are so under attack in right-wing America and Trump undermining the noble profession and blah, blah, blah. A journalist actually attacked, it's crickets from the mainstream media as far as I can tell. This was a New York Post reporter, so it's being covered in conservative media, Fox News, National Review. I guess here's an item from BBC, but I'm not seeing Washington Post, New York Times, etc.
Yeah,
journalists being attacked.
Just like, there's very little coverage of, there were some new revelations on the Palestinian-American journalist who was shot by Israeli forces. There's pretty obvious reasons why mainstream media isn't interested in tracking down new information about Shireen's killer, and on and on and on. So, there is a real attack on journalism. The biggest attack is coming in the way that independent local journalists are being massively defunded, and there is a corporatization of the profession, which means that unless you work for a billionaire, it's unlikely that you'll have any audience whatsoever. Sometimes that billionaire is independent, and you can say it's Twitter and Elon Musk. Sometimes that billionaire is the owners of the New York Times or the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos and the like, but that is really having a negative effect on the ability for, we've just had these massive layoffs at Vice, et cetera.
There's some coverage of Shireen Abu Akleh. I'm looking. Is this CNN?
Yeah, and there's some coverage of this story as well. So
Axios.
Maybe this isn't a conspiracy.
Well, there's some mainstream coverage of Shireen Abu Akleh.
Well, yeah. I mean, she was killed by the Israeli military in a way that speaks to a much broader systemic issue than a one-off, seemingly genuinely unhinged. I haven't brought up mental health issues. Mental health issues are often brought up in a way that I think undermines holding people accountable for their actions, but it does seem to me very obviously that this person is not behaving in a way that is well. But I'm not a doctor, so I'll leave that to the experts.
We'll leave it to the experts. All right, we'll have more Rising in just a minute.